Hey, Dr. C here with you. I want to talk about biotin and your thyroid and your hair and your general health. It's an important nutrient to be aware of, and there's been some confusion, some misinformation about that, and data that seemed contradictory. So I spent some time sorting it through and wanted to share that with you and just share the overall experience with that. There's been thoughts that it can cause hypothyroidism in high dosages. There's also been thoughts that you need high amounts to cause hair to come back again. So let's go deep in this. Now, interesting thing is that this was the last B vitamin that we discovered, the most recent one. Well, there's debates whether choline would be a B vitamin, whether it goes in that category, and its discovery is more recent. But biotin is the last definite B vitamin that we discovered. And we found it because it's rather hard to be overtly deficient in biotin and have that be a distinct phenomena. It showed up when people were consuming lots of raw eggs. There hadn't been many who had done that before, but it became a pretty common practice during what was called the physical culture that matured in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. If you ever saw the first Rocky movie, he chugged the big thing of raw eggs. You know, that was a habit. That was a rather common practice. And what happens is that egg yolks are a very rich nutritional source of biotin. However, the whites contain an enzyme called avidane that can destroy biotin. Now, avidane is pretty fragile if you heat it. So when egg whites are pasteurized, as they are when you get liquid concentrated egg whites, or if they're cooked, the avidane is no longer biologically active. But if you're chugging a lot of raw eggs, even with the yolks, you can net a biotin deficiency. And people did. You know, they had significant hair loss, which was pretty complete and pretty extensive. They also had dermatitis that was rather distinct, and it was found to be related to this particular B vitamin. And the amounts that we need per day are amounts that we can get, but also it's possible to fall behind in. People can eat good foods, but end up being low in that. I'll pop up an image real quick that just shows daily requirements here for it. And here we go. So what we know is that it takes just a few micrograms, but for adults, that's somewhere in the 30 range, 30 or above, to really offset the deficiency problems. And that is taking into account the fact that many people have different needs. Some need higher, some need lower amounts. There's not so much harm of overdose biotin from the diet, but the allowances there give padding for those that have biochemical variations. That is taken into account. So 30 micrograms is really going to meet the needs for most adults. Those that are still growing, those that are lactating could be a little bit higher, but still pretty close to that range. Then we think about what we have in foods. And in compiling this, I was a little surprised to see that you could eat healthy foods and find yourself low. You could get fewer than 30 micrograms of biotin. It definitely could happen. So it's in many foods, but the highest food sources might be 20 micrograms, 17 micrograms. Your highest practical food source would be oats, rolled oats, steel cut oats. I love whole oats, all versions of that. You can end up with about 20 micrograms of biotin per serving. Wheat germ was rather high in that, but practical serving size, more like about 15 to 17 micrograms. An ounce of almonds will give you 15 micrograms. You'll get some from sweet potatoes, brown rice, mushrooms. But past that, the numbers really do start to drop off. So without consistently getting some of those higher biotin foods, one could get low. And if one were excluding nuts and excluding grains from their diet, they would have a hard time closing that gap. It could easily fall behind. The other thought is that alcohol does deplete biotin, and there's a strong relationship for each regular serving of alcohol and one's rates of being low in biotin. So if you've got a regular alcohol intake, it may be something you'd want to be more mindful of. And there are serum tests that do show your biotin status. They are available. And we do see that by serum markers, about a third of pregnant and lactating women may be low in biotin. They're less at risk when they are taking an appropriate multi that does contain that. There was also a study I saw looking at those who had hair loss, women that had had significant hair loss. And of this subpopulation, there was between 30 to 40% of different subgroups that were low in serum biotin. So it really does happen. before seeing some of those studies, I was under the impression that the deficiencies were much more unusual and much more rare, but they may occur relevantly in populations. Now, you can get serum tests done. If you're below 200 nanograms per liter, you're considered deficient. If you're below 400, you're considered suboptimal. More than 400 is considered healthy. But with testing, you'd want to not take any supplements of biotin for at least 73 hours beforehand. It makes me nuts to say 73 hours. I wish I could say 72 because that would just be 3 days. But the data on how biotin skews labs, and I'll talk more about that, it's actually 73 hours. So, oh well. So you can check it. You'd want to make sure you're not low if you've got some of those symptoms like hair loss or concerns about skin or dermatitis, or if your diet is very low in some of these high biotin foods. But then what about thyroid disease? There's been talk that high dose biotin may slow the thyroid. And it turns out this is really an artifact from biotin and how it works in laboratory reagents. So in the past, we thought that doses above 10,000 micrograms or 5,000 micrograms, which could also be called 5 or 10 milligrams, we thought that high doses like this could cause hypothyroidism for some people. And then we start realizing, oh no, wait, it doesn't really cause thyroid disease, it just goofs up TSH levels. And now we've learned more. That's all true, but what we now know in addition is that it'll also affect T4, ferritin, vitamin D. And one paper I read showed that it affected certain tumor markers. It didn't specify, and I couldn't find details on which tumor markers. So that also left me irritated. I didn't get a definitive answer. But some tumor markers, there's those that are used for breast or ovarian cancer or prostate cancer, but they may be disrupted. And what we learned is that it doesn't just take mega doses. Pretty much any supplemental dose of biotin can do that. And please be clear, it's not changing your body. It's not making you have different amounts of vitamin D, ferritin, TSH, T4, or tumor markers. It's only changing how they're read in the laboratory. It changes the chemistry reaction between having biotin in your blood and the reagents used in the laboratory. It goofs it up. So the window of separation you want to think about is a solid 73 hours. So those that are on the daily reset pack, for example, let's say you're going to have blood tests done Monday morning. So take your last dose Friday morning, but not sooner than that, and you'll be good. But you want a solid 73 hours gap between that for those blood results. Otherwise, it could disrupt it. So main action steps, get a good amount of biotin through foods. Think about the foods that are highest in that and get at least a serving or two of some of the higher sources throughout the course of a day. Also, it's good to have some in baseline supplementation. We did include that in a type and an appropriate form in the Daily Reset Pack as well. If you have had symptoms that might relate to that, such as hair loss, consider screening. Consider screening your serum levels for biotin. And for that one, you definitely can't take biotin beforehand or you'll get goofy amounts. Avoid raw egg whites. It's actually good to avoid anyway for salmonella risk, foodborne illness, and be mindful of just having healthy sources of biotin in the diet. So that's the primer on biotin. Avoid it before your tests, get some in foods, get some from supplements, and things will go well. Take great care. I'll see you real soon. Bye-bye.